We are absolutely delighted, privileged, and honored. Paul is a dear friend. I've known him for a while. We worked together for him to be on Voices of the Future. Paul has a very keen and a critical thinking mind. He researches, he goes into depth, he understands things, and he emotionally connects and feels things. And I think that is what's required more and more. That in this world of technology, we have people with humanity, we have people with a connection with life and emotion. And that is one of the reasons why I feel that Paul would be a great contributor to Voices of the Future, to this podcast, and to this movement as we go forward. Paul, firstly, welcome. Wonderful to have you here, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Tarek. It's my pleasure.
Well, I see you as a very general futurist because working together with you, you have connected with technology, with all sorts of human trends that are going on. How do you describe yourself? How do you define yourself?
It's a great question, Tarek. How I define myself is that I'm a generalist. I deliberately have chosen for that to keep oversight about what is going on in the world with respect to technology. So I know about a lot of things a little bit instead of a lot about a little bit. And that gives me the opportunity to connect dots, to see where things are going without going in all kind of details, rabbit holes, worm cans, whatever you call it, to keep seeing opportunities and also finding more and more that those technologies that I'm trying to study are connected more and more, and they are entangled. And the entanglement is increasingly difficult to untangle and see where certain things are running, are developing, are guiding the other parts of that entanglement, and how that affects our environment, how that affects our lives, etc. Yeah.
You know, you have used different set of words. If you remember, we used to use the word convergence of technologies coming together. Then we are cooking them. At the moment, it's being cooked. And then there's divergence, unintended consequences, new things happening, and change taking place that the world is not ready for. And whether it's generative AI or various other things, which we will get deeper into, there are a lot of unintended consequences. My key question is to you, and I make the statement regularly in my presentations, is the more technological the world becomes, the more human we need to be, the more connected, the more intuitive, the more creative, the more imaginative, the more loving, compassionate and compassionate. These are the attributes that are so important for us as we go forward. What are your thoughts on it, and how does that come together in this world as you see it?
Yeah, again, it's a very good question, and that is what puzzles me already for a long time, because I think that due to the technology that we see here today, what you said, well, the convergence and then that it diverges, that is the general purpose of for instance, AI. It trickles in all kind of other things that we are doing. Made that one thing became really, really clear to me over the past maybe 7-8 years, and that is that we think that we are connected, but I think also that the connection has been eroded dramatically. A couple of things are happening here, what I see, and every day when I'm working with young people also, they are more focused. Firstly, the attention span is shortening dramatically. If you ask them to read a text or something, that is more than 3-4 pages, they don't do it. If you say, well, go to that YouTube because that is probably interesting, but it is 1.5 hours, is a no-go. Can you not summarize that? Those kind of things is what I'm getting. And what I noticed is that they are way more focusing on likes that they're getting. So how I see it, likes seem to be in this eroding connections, a kind of a medicine that eases people's mind. I'm still worthwhile to listen to or to read about, whatever it is, because my likes are more important. TikTok, there are a lot of people making a lot of money with that because they are doing things that I'm asking myself, and maybe other people lesser, what is the meaning of that? What are you trying to achieve other than getting likes, other than getting more people connected to you, to the, I would say, superficial things that, in my opinion, don't add any value.
Social media to me and the way it's being constructed, and to me that is uh, very sinister because I see it as an addiction engine and
Yeah,
a manipulation engine.
yeah,
And those two words to me, they stick with me because we are the product, we are not the consumer. And then we provide them with all the data and all the
true.
behavior and all the analysis and all the insights. And they are masters at actually mining that and then monetizing that. So, and that we can discuss later in terms of whether our current form of capitalism is really ready for the kind of godlike technology that we have today and how it can really manipulate people. Maybe you can answer it now. I mean, do you think that our current capitalistic structure that we have? I love the capitalistic concept of entrepreneurship, energy, etc. But I think hypercapitalism, as in the technology companies and oil companies and so on, is destroying the world. And there is no, it's not abating, and there is no incentive to reduce. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts about it, if you go back to the Industrial Revolution, when we had the steam engine and things started to speed up pretty much. Then we moved to the electrical age where things were electrified and a lot of things became fast. Then we moved into the digital era where we are kind of now, and we are moving to the next level. And the thing in the light of capitalism, what you see is that we do exactly the same thing, only fast, and only to make in a shorter amount of time more money. So that is capitalism, I would almost say on steroids, and that will be going fast. Bring
So
in the
we need
mix.
So we need to change it into conscious capitalism, sustainable
No,
capitalism, responsible capitalism,
yeah,
trusted capitalism. There are different words that we can apply, and perhaps the time has come for the world to change.
yeah, absolutely, and I do agree with that. However, there are a lot of people who are pulling the strings, make that this is not going to change. What I usually say, there is no religion in the world with so many followers as the GDP. And everybody is, I would almost say, victim of the GDP. And if you don't make the growth of 3% annually, you will be punished.
Yeah,
It is officially in the EU, they have to grow 2.4% annually. If not, you have a problem. And if you accumulate that, that
yeah,
is only going exponentially in the end.
yeah,
So I think that our economic system is something different than capitalism. Our economic system is, I would almost say, that does not work anymore. And that is my big criticism around exponential growth. Exponential growth in a finite world doesn't work. So we have to come up with something else. And that something else, Derek, and it is not pleasant to mention that, is that I think less is more. We have to do less instead of more. Um, and that is the beauty of what I studied for quite some time is Jevons paradox. And Jevons paradox is a very interesting thing. That means that if we do things more efficiently, we can save a lot of energy. We can save a lot of material. We can save a lot of, you name it, you know. And as an effect, the things that we are bringing to the market are cheaper. And guess what? Because it's becoming cheaper, people want more. So it is a paradox that we cannot escape from.
Yeah.
The hunt to do things faster, cheaper, smaller, etc., has the contra effect that we want more. And therefore, it is only increasing.
Yeah.
It's only increasing.
Very philosophical thoughts, Paul, and I think it's important that we look at this thing philosophically. A lot of the world does not, and I dare say you and I will have a deeper conversation even during this session. But before we do that, Paul, let's take you back into your early life when you were a young person. What has shaped you? What has brought you to this day? What has marked your life and defined your life?
Yeah, Tarek. A couple of things in my life happened that formed me, that shaped me. The first thing, when I was a young child, and I think I was maybe 4 years, and I never forget that moment in my life. I was sitting on a sand road because there were no asphalt roads where I lived in the rural areas, and cartridges with horses, you know, came by and go to the fields for harvesting or whatever. And I was sitting at the edge of that road, and those horses came by, big, huge horses, you know. And I was playing with sand, and I remember that I feel it still, and I was perfectly united with the things around me. That moment, I will never forget it. It was almost a mystical experience. And that was always with me. What happened at that moment? And I had that kind of experiences more often after that. Then I made a decision to go as one of the first people to a new education and nursing. So I went there, and with only one goal, and that is that I wanted to work in psychiatry. And I worked in psychiatry, and that is where I saw really people suffering, intangibly suffering, because you don't see what's going on in the mind. You don't see that. You only can feel that. So, and that became a bigger instrument in my life that formed me. And we were already in that nursing school deeply talking about holism. What is holism? How can you see that? How can you feel it? How can you practice that? Fast forward, moving fast forward. If I'm looking around now in things that Ken Wilbert, for instance, does, you know, that spiral psychology and some other things, philosophers, they are talking about holism. And they're talking about holism because the world is fragmented. And during my life, now I'm going back, during my life, I went, of course, to schools and stuff. And what I noticed, oh my God, everything is so disconnected. The things that we are learning is just in silos. And I had no clue how you could combine it, connect them. So during my work as in psychiatry environment, I saw that I had a lot of shortcomings, and I decided to study psychology to bring more connections together, and that worked. I did understand more and more. While I was doing that, I got fascinated with the philosophical part of it, so I started to study philosophy. And that brought another layer on top of what I did. And that formed me majorly, massively, because I started to ask different questions about the things around me. And for some people, that was very complicated, switching off, because, well, yeah, it is as it is. No, it is not as it is. We have to think about it and see how we can change certain things. And then that is another layer in my life that formed me is when I became a lecturer. on the University of Applied Sciences, I got in contact with University Hospital, who started in the very early days with the development of electronic patient record systems. And that is where they asked me, because they knew that I was interested in technology and computer technology that just came up, and I'm talking about the early 80s. And that brought me in a completely new world of computational technology and software development. But I didn't know enough, so I studied information technology. And that became a kind of the concoction, if you will, the cocktail of how I walk my life, you know.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's a long journey, but what you're now doing is connecting the dots, Paul, as I see it. And a lot of people don't see it like this. That we can study economics or we can study psychology, but we are lifelong learners, and we bring all these elements together and add layers, and then the connectivity starts coming in, and new ideas are formulated. And that's why I think the world is becoming more an important place for generalists like you and I. There's always a place for specialists. We need them. But I think we need the Renaissance men and women as we go forward into the future. 25 years ago, Paul, you met with Ray Kurzweil, the very famous person from Google, their chief innovation and thinking officer. Can you share some of your early conversations with Ray and Peter Diamandis and the early days of Singularity? Because you've been a part of that. I want to sort of set the context in terms of the culture and the history of what I would call the modern singularity revolution, or the modern exponential revolution that we're going through.
Yeah, so I met Ray Kurzweil not 25 years ago, but it was about 13, no, longer, 15 years ago. During a conference in Denmark, I read his book, The Singularity is Near, when it was published, and I was fascinated by the things that he was writing, and it was very recognizable. As a educated information technologist and lecturer, I saw things changing around me, but I didn't have the vocabulary. What is really going on? And when I firstly read his article, "The Law of Accelerating is Returning," I got that vocabulary, I got that understanding, and when I read Singularity is Near, it became kind of a puzzle, things fell together. And especially what I liked was the last part of his book, more than all the technological things, is more the ethical implications of it. That is what I liked. So I went to that conference in 2008, I think, in Denmark, and there he was talking about it. And what struck me was that people in the audience were asking him all kind of questions about what technologically is possible, and no one asked an ethical question.
Yeah.
That was for me something is wrong. But in that conference, he announced that he would start the Singularity University, and I thought, well, I'm the first who was going there. I couldn't make it first time, but second time I was there. And that is where I also met Peter Diamandis and the other hotshots like Daniel Kraft and Ray Kurzweil. And that was the beginning. We were a very intimate group. We were about 40 people in the executive program. And that is where we had conversations. It was not about the money that we could make with technology, but it was more about what is the technology, how fast are things going, etc., etc. And we had discussions about that. Later on, 4 years later or 5 years later, I went again to the Singularity University, and I saw a big change. Moving into the direction, how fast can you make your first billion if you are using the right technology? And that is where I switched off. I have been a chapter lead in Dubai and in Eindhoven here in the Netherlands. And I noticed that more and more, which brought my critical thinking on steroids. And I thought, well, something is something has to change. There has to be a new voice coming in to question that. And not that it is because of me, but I put a lot of pressure in the singularity community to talk way more about ethical implications. When I was there in 2018, it was hardly on the agenda. And I was just pounding on the table and said, guys, we have to do that because so many people benefit from it, but so many not. And it is not the promise of the technology that we sending into the world that technology is going to do. It is not. And I'm always going back to what Leonard says. Firstly, we are in awe of technology, then we get addicted, and in the end, it becomes toxic. And I think there is a lot of reality in that. That's what I see around. And after that, I see way more now also in the briefings that Peter Diamandis does. It now starts always with implications, ethical questions, and those kind of things, specifically now related to AI. And lately we are talking about MMLU, which is the massive multi-language understanding, instead of LLMs. And that is the Gemini, sorry, that Google just launched, has that capability. And my immediate thing is what you said earlier in the conversation about social media. Yes, we are using these LLMs or these MMLUs, whatever they may be, to do something with us, to form us, because in the end, the information that they are using regarding your book as well is based on that book, and it condenses it. And that what is condensed is becoming part of the library that other people are going to use again.
Yeah. Yes, I know.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, things are evolving at a different pace now. Let me share a quote that I use. I can't remember who it is from, but that we have Paleolithic brains, linear brains. We have medieval structures and systems that we have in our environments, but we have godlike technology that's changing the world. And that distinct gaps between these three states, it makes this whole issue way more complex than we can even imagine, because we just can't. Our linear brains cannot handle the godlike technologies, let alone the systems that get in the way and the immune systems that get in the way.
It's not a linear way of thinking there, Tarek. It's not our brains are not linear.
No, our brains are not linear, but our thinking and our training and that is very linear. Okay.
It's not. In my opinion, it is not. It is the amount of information that we cannot process that quickly. Right. It's not because of our linearity. It is because our capacity. And what is happening, and that's another thing, is that what I said earlier, we in the Industrial Revolution, the steam machine engines and whatever, we outsourced our muscles. Machines came there. We are now in an era, and it was very tangible.
Yeah.
And we are now in an era that we are going to outsource our brains, our thinking, and that's a different ball game that is intangible. And and that's the other thing, we are relying more and more on that. And at the back end of that, it is relying on electricity. So we are now completely depending on electricity. And now imagine that we will have an outage of electricity for 5 days. How would the world be? Only 5 days. And think about it for a minute. What will that do? And then people say, yeah, but we have backup systems. Yeah, only the backup systems are critical systems. But a lot of things are not critical in the view of people who think that they are critical. Yeah. And those matter. Those
Indeed.
matter.
Paul, I'm big on trust and truth and ethics, as you have been mentioning. and how they get interlinked as one of the key things that define the future. Um, I'm very keen to hear your view on things like ethics of robotics, for example. We could have a manifesto which simply says robots should not kill. They should not kill human beings. Anybody who programs something like that, the company closes down. This is exactly like non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. After the beginning, we put guardrails, we put some limitations. It's not perfect, but it's about 80-90% perfect. We haven't had a single bomb after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So it's lasted 75 years. It's not completely useless. What kind of guardrails, what kind
Yeah.
of ethical manifestos for robotics? Because what are we doing in robotics? The first thing we do is build weapons and go and bomb Yemen and Afghanistan and Ukraine and now Palestine. That's what they are being used for. And that to me is so sad because it is a human created environment. And I think it has an ethical component, a moral component, a human component that, people like yourselves and hopefully a movement like this in terms of voices of the future, we can address these issues. What are firstly, your thoughts? And secondly, what can we do together on this?
Yeah, I think, Tarek, this is the core of this conversation between you and me, and we talked about that already for a couple of years. Firstly, here is a thing that overwhelms me all the time. When I'm on the train going to airport or to Amsterdam, I'm passing through the South Axis in Amsterdam. The South Axis in Amsterdam are all high rises with lawyer offices. And I cannot resist to think that is where we outsourced our trust in contracts, in agreements, in whatever, and they are growing. And all over the world, we can think in capitalism, we can think in whatever big technology, the EU that are trying to develop all kind of regulations for AI and whatever. It is coded in legal documents. It's coded in legal documents, and if you want to change it, you have to go there, and you're completely depending on what lawyers do and what lawyers say. They rule the world. It is not a capitalism. It is those documents that are ruling the world. And that is completely outside of our vision.
Yeah.
That is one thing. The other thing is, I think in robot technology, what I really love is the advancements in nanobots and small robots. We are always thinking in the big things, in healthcare and surgical robots. The improvement, what the collaboration between a surgeon and a robot, what we can achieve at the moment is beyond belief. It's amazing. I love that. That is the positive side of it. And lately I was talking to Mary Lou Jepson, who developed a technology, who developed a solution that is able to detect small brain tumors that we cannot see with the best MRI in the world. They can do that with infrared light. And what she's able to do with the software is to change the wavelength. And what she can do now as well is manipulating the wavelength to destroy those tumors, smaller than a millimeter, smaller than half a millimeter. They destroyed it and not touching or destroying anything around that tumor that we always have a problem with if we are radiating people. The same thing. And guess what? What they discovered, and that is the beauty of what is happening and why it is so important that this development is going on, is that the destroyed tumor releases proteins that are boosting our immune system. How beautiful is that? But anyway, back to the dystopian world of what we think about robots. An ethical framework, containment, as what Mustafa Suleiman says, that containment is really important. And you only can do that if you are all the countries around the world, all the companies around the world working on AI, because a robot in itself, but the AI component in it makes it so, let's say, massively intelligent. It's learning while in every step that a robot sets, it's learning because of that algorithms. You only can do that if you have an agreement about with each other, this is what we are doing, this is what those robots can do and should not do.
Yeah.
And Tarek, just give me a second, because I was shocked last week, 2 weeks ago, when this Bletchley Park Summit was, and there was a nice agreement or a statement that they wrote and brought in and signed by 26 countries. 2 weeks later, Italy, Germany, and France, under the pressure of big tech, said, well, maybe we should allow the development of AI because of the big money that is at stake. If I see this Gemini that is just being released by Google, the news around that is this is the first that can beat ChatGPT. And then I'm thinking, how sick are we? Instead of saying, hey, now we have a new type of algorithms that can help us to make things better. And maybe if we would marry with ChatGPT, imagine what could happen then.
Yeah.
But that is not how we are thinking. And that is a big problem that we are all facing. All based on our economic system. It's the money that rules. And the last thing, Tarek, sorry to interrupt you. Have you any idea how many money is invested in developing algorithms in the cybercrime world? Have you any idea?
I don't, but I'm sure it's in trillions.
It is more than all the defense budgets of all the countries in the world combined. And think about that for a minute.
Yeah.
And if we want to get agreements about this containment, what we were just talking about, we have to include them. There is no other way. Because they also know that if the trigger goes off, it will devastating us all. It will maybe, yeah. And the other day I had a discussion with someone and he said, well, yeah, you know what's happening? The people who really can afford it, they have big boats, they can go in the ocean or whatever, off the grid, literally, or build houses in mountains, where they are protected from, these kind of potential disasters that can happen. And again, the people who can afford it are maybe in a safe place because they can.
Yeah.
But the rest of us, and it is about the rest of us, and how can we, and that is your question, what can we do to upend that, to turn that massive tanker or whatever ship into a different direction? I don't have an answer yet.
Sadly, it's our institutions that are failing. When I talk about trust, I talk about trust deficit with our leaders, with our institutions, with our politics, with our congresses, with companies. There is a huge trust deficit. And these technologies have become weapons of mass destruction, literally. Because I believe that I understand the massive capacity and opportunity with AI, but I think the negative forces are even larger in terms, because nuclear weapons is a finite product or a finite system, while generative AI, by replicating and producing itself, it can actually keep learning and developing and learning and developing by itself. So it can actually grow out of control. And all the new movies, whether it's Mission Impossible or and others that I have seen recently, it is all about the AI, the machine, the system going rogue now that it knows everything. So if it's omniscient, which is all knowledge, then it becomes omnipotent, which is all powerful, which basically means they become God. So they become the people who control everything. And the people who are controlling that entity are effectively godlike. So it's a dystopian world which we really need to address. And what I say, Paul, is that our current institutions are failing us. United Nations, World Bank, IMF, World Health Organizations, UNHCR, you name it, they were created 75 years ago for problems 75 years ago, for an outcome after the Second World War, which really needed some guardrails and some direction, and they addressed it very well for maybe 50, 60 years. They are not ready, capable of handling the current environment. So we need a fundamental reset of institutions, whether it's on data and ethics, whether it's on the environment. I mean, big drama in Dubai after 14 days of beating each other and changing one word and half a word here and there. We've come up with something which is watered down around emissions, not fossil fuels, around could versus should, things like that. And I'm thinking we are into semantics while the world is coming down on us.
Yeah,
and,
yeah, I
and it's being
completely
celebrated
agree.
as a success. So
Yeah,
where I'm going with this, Paul, and I know this is a philosophical answer, is that what can thinkers, people like yourselves, how can we amplify this voice and that's the purpose of this platform, to amplify all our collective voices and our collective consciousness to make a difference, to bring about some
yeah,
kind of focus on something fresh and new. And I've spoken to Gerd Leonard on this. I've spoken to Salim Ismail on this. Marshall Goldsmith. They're all in the book, and they've all said, whatever direction we want to go in, let us know, and we'll be able to find a way to work things together.
yeah. You have me on your side because we have to combine all that thinking. But before I go there, Tarek, I want to demystify one thing that you just said. That is the development of AI. You talked about the generative AI. Well, I'm more focusing on artificial general intelligence. There's a step further, and that
Yes.
will go into super intelligence.
Yeah.
There will be no one who is controlling that as a human being. No one. It's beyond human capacity. It's beyond
Correct.
human even involvement. That is the problem.
Yeah.
And so it will, I think, going its own life.
Yeah.
And there is no switch button because those things are so smart, they find ways around it. Unless we put down all the electricity. That is probably the only way. How we are, I think that what I noticed also, and also in the conference where we both were, the Dubai Future Forum, the discussions, the presentations were really profound. But Tarek, that is probably understandable by 5% of the population, the world population, even less, I think. So what we have to do is to bring it down to come to very simple things that people see in daily life, and what can they do in their daily life to change that a little bit. And it starts in grad schools, and even earlier in education to help people to understand what's going on and how they can not only manage it, but trying to change it. And children are very creative in finding solutions around it. And how to do that is getting all those people who were in that book, maybe in a conference, all of them, and invite whoever wants to be there for a little bit amount of money that they can afford and have this open discussion about it, and let it be a alternative for COP, but then in terms of AI, in terms of our future. A COP for future, not a COP because of these emissions, because, Derek, let's be honest, it's only an economic discussion. It has nothing to do with taking care of the planet. It's just bullshit. And I think we have to face that. And I'm using very powerful words, bullshit, but I believe it is bullshit.
Yes.
And it is window dressing. And if people are celebrating a little thing that I think doesn't make any difference, is to triple the solar panels and the windmills around the world. Firstly, who's paying that for countries who really need it and cannot afford it? Are we going to do that? No, probably not, because the economists of a country said, "Oh, well, that's what we are not going to do." And the other countries of companies are rubbing their hands because now we have money. Things are connected and we cannot separate it. That is also my big problem with the SDGs. The SDGs are all siloed, but they are connected. If we would connect them and would pay more attention to that, then maybe we should also do that with AI. Things are connected. What you just said about the nuclear war, we are now 75 years without, because it is tangible. If that bomb explodes, it is tangible.
Correct. Yeah.
AI, we don't see what AI does. It's intangible. It is somewhere running on computers that we cannot see.
Indeed. Well, let me get into an area which I call rapid answers and rapid questions. So shorter, tighter questions, and then we will recap from there. The first one is that healthcare technology, and where are we going with it? I know it's very close to your heart.
We are moving into a world where we can early diagnose what's going on. People are more in control about their health, and we are able to treat diseases that we were not able to treat before. As long as we also include the root cause of these diseases. We can cure all kinds of tumors, but if we, for instance, caused by plastic, but if we don't do anything on microplastics, then we can do whatever we want, but that's not going to change.
The second question is, what are the new diagnostic procedures and some of the new treatments that you see down the line?
I just mentioned one that I'm very excited about. That is what Open Water is doing with Mary Lou Jepson. That is really, really breakthrough thinking, because it's not only tumors, but also we can treat very quickly strokes, if it is a clot, not a bleeding, but a stroke. But we also can, in our body, detect all kinds of deviations, and also immediately can see, hey, does that need treatment or not?
Human longevity is a buzzword, and there's a lot going on at the Future Forum and around us. And the book already has 3 people who talk about longevity. I'll ask you the same question. But before I ask the question, just a little bit of reflection. Is it becoming very egoistic and narcissistic? In other words, I have money, therefore I can buy life. I mean, if Steve Jobs was still around, he would probably be investing big time into it. That's one area. The second one, which I encountered a few years ago when I was with Deepak Chopra, was that our human body can be extended to 100, 120 and beyond, but is our human brain ready for that level of extension with Parkinson's and all of the other mental diseases that we have, not to mention just simple burnout and stress and all of those wonderful things. So, in your opinion, what is longevity? Are we getting carried away, or is it only for the 1% who can afford it, and for everybody else will just hopefully be beneficiaries in the fullness of time?
Yeah, but everything that is new, it has a high price. So that's not a surprise. That we have extended our lives over the last 10,000 years. That's also clear. With all the kind of interesting new medications that we developed. But there are a couple of big breakthroughs that we hardly hear about. Is firstly hygiene. Florence Nightingale, who came to the conclusion, hey, you have to wash your hands, simply that, that helped a lot. And the second thing is antibiotics. That helped us big time. In the whole, and there's a third one that I hardly forgot, and that is our simply refrigerator. So we can keep our food longer in a good state. A lot of people died because of food that was rotten or not in the right state. Those three things, I think, really helped in our extension of life. Longevity in general, and specifically if I hear people are talking about immortality, then I think, okay, everything on our planet, everything in our universe has a end of a life cycle. Even stars are exploding at a certain moment. Even our solar system has an end of life. So if you are talking about the death of death and are eradicating death, then I'm thinking, okay, and I'm going really crazy now. So imagine that we now shooting ourselves into the universe, and then we are floating around because we cannot die. But how are we communicating? Where do we want to go? In what kind of state are we going? Can we unfold ourselves? Can we unzip ourselves? All those questions are coming to mind, but specifically the communication. And what is then the longevity? Is that only our thinking? Is that our brain? Is that our memory? Or is it also our body and our feelings and our experiences and you name it and you name it? And technically, I do understand that we can probably eradicate a lot of things, but what we don't know is what will come in place of that. We know still so little about how our body works, and that it all the time surprises us, pretending that we know it. So the things that we are doing in longevity in new medications always has an effect, and we cannot oversee that effect, even with the digital twin. I had a long discussion with people who, and I was involved in that as well. Sorry for the long answer. With Philips, we were working on the digital twin, and again in Dubai, I was talking to people, the whole team was working on that, and I said, well, it is a little bit misleading, a digital twin, because firstly, what kind of data do you collect that forms my digital twin? And it is very superficial. And imagine that we have all the data. How are we keeping up that data? Because if I'm here and I'm stepping 2 steps aside, my body has been changed.
Sure.
Who's checking that?
And our nervous system changes every 3 to 4 weeks, and it regenerates itself and so on.
Yeah. So how are you keeping up with that? Yeah, we will figure it out. And yeah, I heard that more often. We will figure it out. But that is how complicated our body works and is, that we even don't know yet. We are starting to scratch how our brains are working. That's the beauty of it. And to unravel that all, maybe it's good. And that little bit that we know is that we are trying to transfer in AI or in robots. Robots are always, humanoids are always human-like. And I think, well, why is that? Why should it be a human? Why
100%.
not something else?
Yeah.
You
I
know,
remember asking a question to an audience about Sophia, the robot. I said, what is the gender of this robot? And 80-90% of the people said female. I said, no, it's a tin can. It's not a female. It's a box with wires, and it's just been given a human form. So, folks,
yeah,
and I think we need to obviously demystify that. Uh, Paul, from all the sublime and the philosophical, can we get down to some basic and human and day-to-day stuff, with your permission? Uh, Parents of today, young kids coming up, Gen Alpha, the Gen Z is out of hand already, but let's look at Gen Alpha born in 2010 afterwards. Um, should they be worried? What is it your advice and your counsel to a parent with a young child?
Yeah, I'm happy also, Tarek, that I'm mentoring still some young students from the School of Humanity, and they are in that age. And I'm asking those questions. And what they always reply to me, you know, we find this type of education so brilliant because it encourages our curiosity. And the advice that they also discussed with their parents is, please let us keep this open-mindedness, that we are able to be exposed to multiple things that are happening in the world, that are shaping our world, and not excluding things, because it is a system where we are sitting. And so that open-mindedness, curiosity, and also, yeah, the core word of everything that we are doing is love. To help them understand what love is. Love is way, way, way more beyond sex that we brought it down to. Love is sex. It's just maybe 1% of what love maybe can be. And helping people to understand it. That, you know, and if people don't understand it, let them buy a pet, a dog or something, and see how they can connect. Because with that connection, people allow themselves more than in a human being a relationship.
Yeah. No, I mean, so I think you preempted my next question, which was about the future of learning, and you've addressed some of the issues there with School of Humanity and the young people. But going back again, because I get this question asked all the time. I'm a young parent with a young child. Um, what should I be doing? How should I be thinking? How am I handling some of the big surprises that I'm getting from my children? I don't understand 80% of the technology that they are working on. I know every generation, every 25 years, the same cycle happens. But I'm talking about today's parents, today's 35, 40-year-old parent with a 10-year-old child. Um, where, how should they shape their thinking? And what's next for them?
Tarek, there's a very simple answer to that. I think that you should co-create. Um, Parents should sit next to the child and say, hey, tell me what's going on. What can you teach me? And how does that work? What are you doing with it? Get in that world of the children, and let them tell you what they are doing with it and how they are using it, and try to understand it, and not having already your opinion because it doesn't fit in what you are doing. But the other way around as well, that a parent has to tell a child what they are doing with the technology in their work, in their relationships, and whatever. That co-creation of the child's future is what parents should do. But guess what, Derek? We don't have time. We
Yes.
outsourced, we outsourced education, we outsourced
Care.
care
Yeah.
to daycare, to nannies, to whatever, because
Yeah.
we don't have time.
Yeah.
I think that is a bigger problem. And where can you find the time to do that with your children? I'm as we speak, I'm writing a book with my grandchild, and we have discussions about things that we are talking about, but then in children's language. And she's learning all the time, and I'm learning all the time, because their world, how they conceive things, is different. But what I always see is that they are caring more about the environment than what we are doing. That's what I see.
Yeah. I was doing some of this co-creation with Professor Tony Buzan, working with kids
Yeah.
when he was alive. and exactly these insights that you're
Mm.
talking about. They're much more curious, they're much more caring, they make friends much easier. And in this very sadly dystopian world where there are wars and stuff like that, I think it's extremely critical that we bring that love and humanity and compassion back into our lives.
Yeah,
One more question.
this summer, Tarek, I was with my grandchildren in a completely strange environment with all kind of people from all over the world, you know. And within 2 seconds, they were playing, they were doing whatever. They don't speak each other language, but
Yes.
who cares?
Yeah.
We have fun, and and we unlearn that. You know, yeah, it's too sad for words, but you see it happen. Yeah.
So that's parents. One other stakeholder group that we encounter all the time, sadly, and we work with them, and that is the CEOs and the chairmen
Mhm.
and decision makers in business who basically we live in a work related environment, so that happens all the time. What's our advice to them in this kind of environment? How do they address their immune systems? How do we support them to be able to absorb some of these changes that are happening? Because I think they are massively lagging in terms of where they are at this point in time. Your thoughts?
Yeah, Tarek, all that is, again, is a very complicated question, but let me try to be very brief. Firstly, it is systemic. Those CEOs or executives, specifically in big companies, they don't have to say that much because there are shareholders telling them what to do. And so they are in many cases the slaves of the shareholders and have to please them. That limits their capabilities dramatically. But let me go back. Last weekend, I finished a course with Scott Barry Kaufman about self-actualization and how can we bring self-actualization in the board, and not only single executives, but as a team. Because as a team, they have to make decisions. And if you go in a board room, Derek, it is siloed again. You have the CFO, you have the CTO, you have the CEO, you have the whatever officer, as long as you have an officer, they all have their own silo. But as a team, how are you working as a team is a different story. That is where the human connection is. That is where we at Alex saw that they have that little piece of paper where they committed to each other, whatever happens, we will be there. And they did. In boards, I don't see that. It is those siloed things. And we want to break through that with the self-actualization concept based on Maslow's work. But also I combined it with syntropic world synergy. The long courses that I did with Christine McDowell. Those insights are going on holism, but how to get there. So there is not something fluffy or whatever. It is a very structured, scientifically proven way to get there. And once you can bring that in boardrooms, the dynamics will change completely. But also how they are communicating, how they are dealing, how they are collaborating with the shareholders.
You didn't mention Sonia's work on conscious leadership about bringing love back into our
Yeah,
business life,
yeah, yeah.
which is also amazing to understand the wisdom of great great generations and great civilizations.
Yeah, the indigenous knowledge coming up, and not that you have um, to make it more than that it is, but there is a lot of wisdom that we still can use. When those indigenous people lived, the
Yeah,
world was completely different.
yeah,
But the one thing that you see everywhere is connection, 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 and taking responsibility of that connection.
yeah.
And that is what we lost. So that is what I call the big this detachment that I see in our societies, not only with ourselves, but also with our environment and with one and another. That's a problem.
Paul, we've spoken a lot of things. AI, on the one hand, health tech, we've spoken about longevity, learning, kids. We've even touched philosophy, politics, war, technology, money, capitalism. Has been a huge conversation in lots of areas. We've been together for almost an hour now. And my final question, having connected all of these dots, addressed all of these issues, Paul, if you were to leave a message in a bottle and you throw it into the sea and we pick it up 10 years from now, what will your young granddaughter see in that message with all of the wisdom of life and all of these connection points that you have today? You want to pass it and give it forward to a future generation. What would that voice be? What would that message be that you would like to pass on?
Don't be judgmental. Be respectful in everything that you do. See the beauty of things and embrace where you are. That is what I'm teaching by doing my grandchildren. That is what I'm teaching in the School of Humanity with the students. That's what I live. That is what I started to live more. We had a lot of disconnections when we worked together, but there is always one thing that did not disappear, and that is love, that is respect, and that you in that realm can have disagreements. I wish everybody that trait, that they can do that and they can develop that. That's the only way, Tarek, that is the only way how we can eradicate conflicts around the world. We have to do it together.
Well, on that beautiful note, there's very little to follow. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your humanity. Thank you for all the learnings that I've had from you. And believe me, I've learned a lot from you. You know, gratitude always, and humility in terms of how we can build and sustain our long-term friendship. Well, you've been a great ally and partner and friend. I wish you all the best, and hope we can do things together in the future with this whole project, because I think we're in the same
We have
boat,
to.
and we're in the same boat, all of us. And
Okay.
I think our voices need to be combined again in the future to do good things. Thank you very much indeed.